people think, oh, this is just this aha moment. Like one day you're going to wake up and say, you know what, an air filter is how I'm going to go and make my money. And that is just never how it works, at least in my experience. You have to be willing to put in the work, build the skill set, experiment, kind of get some experience, maybe working for somebody else, kind of just seeing how things work, so that then you can get the insights that are going to give you that idea that then you really believe in and you can commit to.
So a few weeks ago, I was tooling around on LinkedIn as I do, and I saw a professionally shot video of a guy talking about this mission that he was on, growing his business from 250 million to a billion and beyond. And his story caught my attention immediately. It was not only the story, the message content of it, but the actual video, because that's part of what my agency does is we create video like this. So I was very impressed. And I went down this rabbit hole trying to figure out who is this guy. And I was so intrigued at what I found that I reached out to him. I asked him to be on the podcast, and to my delight, he accepted. I'm not going to say any more. We can get into his story now. My guest today is David Heacock, CEO of FilterBuy.com. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you for having me, Lee.
I'm super pumped about this conversation. I mean, I don't know you that well, but just from what I've seen, it's like you were invisible and now you are very visible.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I spent the first 12 years or so of my entrepreneurial journey with literally zero public presence and zero social media presence. And it's actually something I was quite proud of. Like if you did a Google search for me, you wouldn't even find a picture of me. You'd find nothing. And for a long time, I thought that was how I wanted to live my whole life, to be honest with you. I see all of the kind of downsides of, being publicly known and what that brings. And especially when you're like going out and kind of doing different and big things, there's some value to anonymity.
Yes.
But, I about 2 years ago, I now started kind of having a little bit of a maybe midlife crisis. I just turned 40 and I built this fairly substantial business, and kind of looking at myself and saying, okay, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? Do I want to sell this business and retire and live happily ever after, or what is it? Like, what is the reason? And I ultimately decided that for me, I really enjoy what I do. And, life is about the journey. There is no kind of fixed destination. And I think that I knew for me to find, I needed to have a reason to wake up every single day to be excited about with something that fueled me, and kind of went down the kind of rabbit hole of figuring out, like, how do I define that? And I ultimately settled on my mission of building the world's leading indoor air quality company. It's kind of the guiding mission for me that drives all of my actions and everything that I do, anything that I do within business, at least. And that has really been the focusing agent for me in what's going next. And I start reverse engineering. What does it take to become the world's leading indoor air quality company from where I am? And there's a realization within that it's not something that I, David Heacock, can do on my own. It's going to take, a whole movement of people and a whole team of people in order to be able to achieve something like that. And if you want to do that, then you have to be public, because otherwise, if people don't know about you, they're not going to come along for the journey or for your ride. And so I did a complete 180, and I think it was October 18th or so of 2024, just a few months ago. I launched my first video on YouTube, and started this whole process of building a personal brand, with my mission being to build the world's leading indoor air quality company. And I have a decent amount of infrastructure that we've already built within FilterBuy, that gives me the resources to be able to attack such a problem. And I hope to use my personal brand to be able to expand our scope, and meet other good, like-minded individuals to partner with us on that journey.
Yeah, well, you're doing a fantastic job. And I have to say, your team is doing great. I mean, I love it. It's very polished. no criticisms. And it's funny because when I first started my podcast, I had some marketers on. This is like a year and a half ago, and we had this discussion around, is it possible to grow a company with no social media? And I even wanted to take it to the next degree to say without a website. That may be taken a little too far because websites are very important. But these marketers, I knew it was going to be a challenge for them because they're really a lot of B2C, and so there's a lot of social that's involved, ads and that kind of thing. And I'm really more heavily on B2B. And so for me, it was simple. It's like, yes, there are millions of people around the world right now building big companies, and they don't even know how to even operate Facebook, right? So I think it's to that problem in that nature. I think it's really cool to see that you are living proof of that. Like, you are over here doing your thing, and doing great things, and then all of a sudden decided to say, hey, if we're going to do it at the next level, I could see how social media and YouTube and some other platforms would be a great tool for me to leverage to do that same thing. But it wasn't, let's do social media for the sake of doing social media.
Yeah, I mean, I think people end up conflating a lot of different things. I mean, I am currently in the process of renovating a house here in West Palm, and one thing that's problematic when you're doing that is the permitting process.
Yes.
And in that process, I actually met a guy who's I would guess in his early 60s, that for the last decade as kind of a second career, he has been a permit expeditor, and he expedites billions of dollars of permits down here in South Florida and makes a very healthy living doing that.
Yes.
And he barely uses email. All he does is he has a phone and he has connectivity within the permit offices that he's built those relationships.
Yeah.
And he has become known as the guy that can get permits done. And so
Amazing.
people pay him a lot of money to do that. And he has no website. He has a Gmail account. If you message him, and you're not going to likely, be able to get in touch with him if you do,
Yeah.
but it's, purely, leveraging relationships and then referrals. And that's how he's been able to build a business. And I think that there are countless examples out there like it. So like people are lying to themselves if they think there is one way of building something. But then you look at me, I mean, I understand internet marketing, at a very deep level. FilterBuy was built off of, what I would call intent-based marketing. So if people are in market for an air filter, then we have dominated that space for the last decade. And so, I have utilized, the marketing tools against that brand over a long period of time. And I mean, and that kind of marketing is in fact how we built the customer base that we have today. But that's very different than like me being on social media, me being building in public, me having a brand. And I think that a lot of times people kind of get lost between the two. Like they're kind of stuck between the ego of wanting to have this kind of known presence and being able to show off to their friends, all this kind of stuff, versus like, hey, what do I actually need to build the brand of the business? And really, like when you're building a business, just like with my permitting example, but also within FilterBuy, you're building your reputation as a business over a long period of time, and that is ultimately your greatest asset is that kind of reputation, that customer experience, how you treat your customers, and that word of mouth, which ultimately leads to a sustainable long-term business. And that's really the most important thing when I think about building a brand. I mean, you can do that against your personal brand. And now I'm obviously taking that leap of doing that against my personal brand, because I think it can be powerful if it can be authentic and unique to you. But it certainly is not necessary to build a business. And I think there are countless examples out there of where it's not been necessary to build your business.
Yes, exactly. And I think the personal brand is leverageable in a different way. So take us back to before FilterBuy. Before we get to that, who were you and what did you do leading up to FilterBuy?
Yeah, so the long story short is I'm from Talladega, Alabama originally, which is a small town of less than 10,000 people, and has probably reduced population my whole life. But I grew up around a family business that was largely in the industrial supply sector that my grandfather started, and so I kind of got early kind of entrepreneurship insights from that, and was always an entrepreneur growing up. I built websites, I built computers when you could used to be able to buy the components and then
Yeah.
build it as a computer and then sell it on
Yeah.
eBay. When I was 15 or 16, I had a decent little business like that, and I
Yeah.
always but experimented, kind of coming of age in the 90s, when
Hmm.
all of this stuff was the internet was really starting to take hold. I went off to college and ultimately landed a job at Goldman Sachs, where I worked for 7 years and ultimately ran the emerging market options trading business in New York, where I was, trading foreign exchange options. And, basically, if you were a corporate or a hedge fund looking to do some type of a trade on in Brazil or
Hmm.
Mexico and wanted to hedge some risk and you needed a price on an option, I was the guy that you would call. And, I kind of fast forward to 2012. My family was kind of going through the sale of the family business. My grandfather was at the end of his life in his early 90s. He didn't really want to see it sold, and so I kind of took a leap and bought this dying industrial supply business, doing no due diligence or anything. Kind of used all the money I had to do it, and found myself. I quit my job, bought the business, and I guess November 1st, 2012, walk into it, and I'm like, oh, what am I going to do with this thing?
Hmm.
And I really had no idea. But I started looking at it, and I realized that the business called Talladega Machinery and Supply Company was not going to stand the test of time. It was basically, we had like 3 or 4 outside salespeople with an average age of probably 60 years old that were kind
Yeah.
of, relying on existing, legacy customer relationships, but like we weren't really offering great value. Like we were buying and selling product,
Yeah.
and like when you're competing with the Grangers or the Amazons of the world, you could see the writing on the wall, like, hey, this thing isn't going to last very long.
Yeah.
And so I had to come up with something, and I ultimately I was looking for a product that I could manufacture competitively in the United States, and sell direct to end user. Like, the direct to consumer movement was really big at the
Hmm.
time. And for me, what direct to consumer meant was like, oh, if I could actually manufacture a product and
Hmm.
sell it direct to the end user, then I would have a sustainable competitive advantage.
Yeah.
That's actually not in practice what most, D2C customer companies are. They're generally just brands that are using contract manufacturing to
Hmm.
sell it. So that's not really direct to consumer how
Yeah.
I define it, but that's how kind of the world defined it. But for me, it was important to find something I could manufacture competitively. And I didn't want to have to compete with imports, because I kind of knew like so much stuff was manufactured in China or Mexico and other places. And I thought, like, what product lines could I would fit this bill, and ultimately settled between remanufactured ink cartridges and pleated air filters, and chose pleated air filters, hence now FilterBuy. But they're unique dynamics in those markets. But like in the air filter market, there are lots of different SKUs. Like we have about 300 different sizes,
Yeah.
because in practice there are all these sizes that are in these buildings. So like no like hardware store or Walmart could possibly have all the sizes that you need. And
Yeah.
then a lot of older buildings actually have custom size air filters, which are actually cut and capped from an existing air filter. Is how you actually manufacture them um, for that use case. And the supply chain for that was such that oftentimes you were waiting 8 weeks to be
Mm.
able to get delivery on that. And I kind of realized, well, I could manufacture these and do the customization work and ship it FedEx to the end user,
Yeah.
and have a sustainable advantage with that. And so I started that process in early 2013. Initially thought I was just going to buy the product from another manufacturer and then do the customization work as needed
Hmm.
and scale that way. Quickly realized that um, you know you have to be able to stay in stock on all your different SKUs if you're
Oh.
going to be able to be successful in the pleated air filter business, because people buy, like, at least a lot of larger customers might buy 5 sizes or 10 sizes at a time
Yeah.
depending on the kind of use case. And if you didn't have one of those sizes, you couldn't take the business.
Yeah.
And we ran out of stock quite a lot early on, and I thought, well, if I want to do this at scale, I have no choice but to manufacture it.
Right.
And so, without any previous experience in the air filter world, I made the hubristic move of saying, "Hey, I'm going to go and I'm just going to start manufacturing on my own."
Mhm.
Having never even been in an air filter manufacturing facility myself, I decided how hard can it be? Is in theory, it's quite simple, but you quickly realize how difficult it is to scale. And so, basically spent the first 5 years in the business, figuring out how to manufacture air filters. We were not doing it competitively. If we did not have a direct to consumer model, we would have been losing money. We were able to kind of stay afloat because we were, selling at a higher price point than
Yeah.
you would if you were like doing it at a wholesale basis. But it really took us about 5 years to be able to manufacture a product that was cheaper than I could have bought it from somebody else.
Hmm.
And that it was a much longer learning curve than I initially imagined it would be, but we finally kind of got over the hump with that and started to find our footing. And then COVID happened, which was a very big tailwind for our business. I mean,
Yeah.
I scaled the business to about $70 million or so a year by 2019, which is, it's still a substantial business. But
Sure.
in order to do our kind of stuff, you really need a decent amount of scale. We were still kind of figuring it out. And the, and then COVID happened, and there was a huge tailwind as all of like the higher MERV ratings and whatnot that were kind of niche before
Hmm.
became very much, they were talked about
Mainstream.
on the news with
Yeah.
like, Andrew Cuomo in New York saying you need a MERV 13 air filter if you want to open up
Yeah.
your restaurant, and yeah, it was great kind of marketing, and
Sure.
we were like one of the largest in that space. Before COVID, and then COVID happened, and it was like a great tailwind for us. And I really used that as an opportunity to expand our customer base. And we were able to acquire customers in that couple-year period at a much higher rate than we ever had been previously. And because we kind of expanded our footprint, we were able to harness that and really build the customer base that we have today. That's really propelled us into what we have today. So that's
Yeah.
the kind of very long story
Yeah.
short.
Yeah. That's a great arc. So let's go back to you bought your grandfather's company and you're doing a lot of things. How did you decide? I know you covered this very quickly, but kind of double clicking into that, how did you decide from all of these things that you're selling to pick air filters? Or you had a couple things you were trying to decide on, but how did you,
Yeah.
again, to our coming conversation about focus, how did you focus down from multiple products to one or two?
Yeah, I'll give you the slightly longer-winded answer for that one because I think it's important in that
Sure.
um, when I talk about an entrepreneurship arc, I think that people need to understand that it really starts. Like it really started probably when I was 11, because I was always in business of some kind. Always had side hustles. Was
Hmm.
always experimenting. I'm a big experimenter,
Hmm.
which I think is important. Even though we'll talk about focus, a
Yeah.
larger focus is certainly key.
Yeah.
But you have to be kind of go down rabbit holes and experiment when you're figuring things out sometimes. And part of the story that I left out before was, during I started Goldman in 2005, and in 2007 is when I actually moved to the trading desk within Goldman. And 2007 is when like the financial crisis started to
Hmm.
happen, and I saw a lot of people around me getting fired, and I was convinced I was going to lose my job, and I had a wife. She's still my wife, but at the time she was um, in medical school, and I
Hmm.
was very proud of the fact that I was able to pay for her to go to medical school without taking on any debt, because I did not want to take on any debt.
Yeah, that's huge.
And I was worried about losing my job, and so I started a side hustle where I was an affiliate marketer for StubHub, and I made in 2008 or 2009 like $550,000 from as an affiliate from StubHub, which
Hmm.
was a lot of money to me at the time.
Yeah.
And um, and I started thinking, wow, that's pretty interesting. And then I was like, wouldn't it be better if I actually owned the product or owned the offer? And so I started a company in early 2009 called My Office Delivered, where we were effectively drop shipping office supplies
Oh.
to largely on Amazon. I actually scaled that to about $5.5 million in 2009. It was a low margin business,
Hmm.
but when I look back at that $5.5 million, about 25% of it was pleated air filters from a
Hmm.
small drop shipper in Creola, Alabama. And another 25% of it was ink cartridges. And then the rest was a bunch of office products. And I ultimately didn't get fired. Actually, the financial crisis was great for me from a career perspective. I had to shut down that business because I didn't have the bandwidth to continue to run that and do my
I can
very
imagine.
taxing day job.
Yeah.
And so I, shut that down, did my day job, and then, fast forward a few years, ultimately bought the industrial supply business. And so that is why, like, because of that previous experience that I had, which I think is so important,
Hmm.
I was like, okay, well, these are two markets I should look at, right?
Yeah.
And so then I did a deep dive on those two markets,
Okay.
and I realized that, like, in the ink cartridge market, I don't know a ton about it now, but like I know, like, the OEMs, like the HPs of the world or the
Hmm.
Canons or whatever, for them, the ink is a very big revenue generator, and so
Yes.
they have a lot of protections around patents
Hmm.
and all of this kind of stuff that, yeah, you can go in and you can work around and you can figure out a way to build a business around, and there are some big businesses in that space.
Yeah.
But I knew that I did not want to sign up for that. And also, like, I was kind of looking at the remanufacture part, which basically means you have to go and get a network of businesses that are going to give you their empty cartridges, and you
Yeah.
refill them and you put them back. And so you have to build all the infrastructure around that,
Yeah.
which, I thought was an opportunity, because if you were able to do that at scale, there could be,
Sure.
it could be a
There's a
good
moat.
business.
Yeah.
But I just realized that for me, that was not that was not super compelling. And so and I saw the air filter opportunity, and I kind of decided to go all in on that.
Hmm.
That was how the decision was ultimately made. But I think what's important about it, is people think, oh, this is just this aha moment. Like, one day you're going to wake up and say, you know what, an air filter is
That's right.
is how I'm going to go and make my money. And that is just never how it works, at least in my experience. You have to be willing to put in the work, build the skill set, experiment, kind of get some experience, maybe working for somebody else, kind of just seeing how things work, so that then you can get the insights that are going to give you that idea that then you really believe in, and you can commit to. So for me, it was a multi-year process. It was not one aha moment, and I
Mhm.
think that that's one thing that a lot of people get wrong when they're thinking about entrepreneurship.
Yeah. 100%. I couldn't agree more. And now, as we move into our topic of focus, this is really actually what got triggered as a very intriguing point in my mind when I saw your first video was, you know, just personally, and this is where I like to bring on guests where I personally have an interest in the conversation, so it goes well. And also, it'd be nice if the guests were interesting and they have good stories and that kind of thing too. But what stuck out to me was the fact that you're talking about focus, and in my personal life and in my business, focus has become a preeminent thing that has to be, or I'm going to continue on the same path of mediocre success that I've had so far. I just have realized, this in the last year or so. And the more I focus, the more focus becomes the priority. And it's sort of cyclical in my mind. And so when I saw that you were talking about focus, I said, "Oh, we got to have you on and talk about. I got to get your perspective on this." So as we launch into this topic and hearing from you about this, because this is your narrative. I mean, this is what you're talking about on the different channels. First, what I want to hear is your mission with FilterBuy, right? Like, what is it? Because I've seen the numbers going. You want to grow from 250 to a billion, and that's great to see the numbers, but what does that journey look like for you? What's the mission if you were to kind of state it plainly?
Yeah, so my mission actually has nothing to do with numbers, to be honest with you. Like, we're putting out
Yeah.
we did about $250 million of revenue last year. We're targeting 280 million this year. And,
Yeah.
I intend to take this business to a billion plus and well beyond. But the real driver is I'm on a mission to build the world's leading indoor air quality company.
Okay.
And, like, if I achieve that, or when I achieve that, that is a multi-billion dollar, tens of billions of dollar opportunity, right? So
Mhm.
like that is how my mind thinks about that. The time frame really doesn't matter to me. I mean, it's that I need to put myself on that path, on that
Mhm.
trajectory. And so when I think people get confused on with focus, and maybe is a little differentiated in how I think about it than maybe other people think about it, is you know, for me, it's important to know what a successful end game looks like for me on a decade plus kind of time horizon.
Yeah.
Because I'm a big believer that people consistently overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in a decade. And you need to really kind of take a step back and think about like, okay, like what do I actually want out of life? Like, what am I actually looking to achieve here?
Mhm.
On a macro, because then that is what is going to be the decision mechanism for all of your smaller day to
Yeah.
day decisions. And so
Yeah.
when I say focus, it's like, okay, well, where am I going on a 10-year period? Like, where do I want to go?
Mhm.
And then like all your short term, like once you have real clarity around that, like once you really know what
Yeah.
it is that you want, which is going to look different for everybody, and you have to have a lot of self awareness. Most people don't want to build $1 billion plus business, and most people shouldn't. It's
Yeah.
really it's a path to misery for most people. For
Right.
me, it works because I have a unique drive and a unique set of skills, and it fuels me in a unique way. But it's not for most people,
Right.
and that's okay. It shouldn't be for most people.
Mhm.
But I know that that's my long term vision,
Okay.
and that is my kind of focus mechanism, my forcing mechanism for all of my short term daily action, right? Because like I have to say, okay, is this action consistent with my like long term vision? Is it going to get me closer to that or not?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes or no. And if it's yes, then yes, I'm going to explore it. If it's no, then I'm going to take it out, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so I think where people get stuck is they're focusing on like um too many small tasks, right?
Mhm.
And that's not actually what I mean by focus. Like sometimes like I will go down rabbit holes, or I will want to learn something
Mhm.
because it's consistent with a skill set I need to build, or with something I
Yeah.
need that is for my long-term focus, and that's okay. You need that kind of creativity to be able to evolve and to learn. And so focus doesn't mean, oh, I'm just going to do this one thing day in, day out, and hope for the best
Yeah.
because I'm focused on it. That's not really what it means to me, at least. To me, it's about being very consistent in
Mhm.
a long-term vision, or very consistent with the person I want to become or want to be, and then every day work towards being a little bit closer to that. And that's really what focus means to me, if that makes any sense.
It does. Yeah. This is a great start to this conversation because what it's making me think of is focus as a skill versus um, more of a discipline. And I think it just sort of came to me because I've thought about this a lot as a discipline, and also discipline being self control, because you have to control yourself from not looking at the wrong things and staying focused. I think it has to start as a discipline, but really in business, it's hard to detach yourself emotionally from all the things that you're doing because it's just not possible. But objectively, it really should be a skill. It seems like that's what you're saying, is that you're building up a skill set of being able to stay on the path.
I reframe it just a little bit differently in that, like you talk about discipline, which is super important. I mean, discipline is more important than motivation for sure any
Yes.
day of the week. But, you know, purpose trumps discipline any day of the week.
Yes.
And so that's why I say you have to have something that is really unique
Compelling.
to you, compelling to you.
Yeah.
You have to have a vision that's so compelling to you that you're going to wake up every day and
That's
and
it.
be drawn to that. Like you're not relying on the discipline that,
Yeah.
hey, I should do this. It's you're compelled by it, right?
Yes.
That is why you have to have that kind of bigger purpose, that bigger vision that is consistent with what you actually want, because then you become compelled to that, and all
Mhm.
your actions compel you to building that, right?
That makes a lot of
Um,
sense. And
and
also,
yeah.
if you get off the path, you're going to be feeling like I'm off the path because I shouldn't be doing this thing or focusing on this thing because I was compelled over here, and so the opposite is true.
Yeah, well, you'll find as you're compelled to it, you're naturally going to get back on it. And I
Yes.
think so many people end up trying to copy what somebody else is doing, or like I have this saying I've used a lot that like, copying somebody else's dreams is a sure path to misery.
Hmm.
And like what social media is like people are like envious of something that somebody else has, and they're like, oh, I'm going to copy it, and then they don't quite achieve it, or then they achieve it and they find they're miserable. And
Hmm.
why is that? Is because it's not actually your dream; it's somebody else's dream.
Yes,
And I think that's what social media and the influencer culture
for
has kind
sure.
of caused. Whereas people would be much smarter, kind of looking inward a bit and being honest, like, hey, maybe I don't need $10 million house to be happy, or a private jet to be happy. Like that's just not who I want. I don't want all the stress for that.
Right.
I want stability, and I want like you. But and for most
Simplicity.
people, like, it's going to look completely different. You got to find what it looks like for you.
Yes.
Um, find your truth, and then reverse engineer the life that leads to that.
Yeah.
And then once you have that awareness, you're compelled to that, and you're going to wake
Yeah.
up every day with that. And then you want to plan and be consistent on your plan and that kind of stuff, and be realistic.
Yeah.
But most people would find much more happiness and success
Hmm.
if they followed that path.
Yeah. It sounds like all of the focus and everything becomes much more natural and much more organic if you do have that purpose. Because if you have that purpose, I think that's what people really struggle with is, once you have that purpose and it makes sense to you, I'm an analytical person, I'm a thinker. So things have to make sense for me to be connected to them. And so when I have the purpose and I am connected to it, then it's just about the practical. I'm compelled to, stick through any hardship or, go through all the things like I'm there for it. But then it's just to the practical. And so my question for you on the practical part is how do you keep yourself from, like you said, you want to go down rabbit holes, right? And rabbit holes experiments can be good and they should be part of the focus. But how do you know if you're going down the wrong rabbit holes or if you're spending time in areas that you shouldn't be spending time in, whereas it would be more better spent on your focus?
Goal setting and accountability. So like
Yeah.
if anybody that's watched my um, YouTube in the last few weeks or last couple of months, you'll see like we've been going through a planning process by segment of our business.
Yeah.
And we have actually publicly showed all of our goals for 2025. And that is a forcing mechanism for us, right? Because we are going to hold ourselves accountable to
Yeah.
achieving those goals. And, those are like, we have a, long-term mission that, I'm very compelled by
Hmm.
I'm going to build the world's leading indoor air quality
Hmm.
company. But, a dream is just a plan with a goal, right? I
Yeah.
mean, and ultimately, like we're going to, we're setting goals and we're doing our short-term planning, and we're doing that. We did that very systematically, publicly for the first time this year, and that's like ultimately how you do it. I mean, like you have to have this like long-term life that is compelling to you, that you're like, hey,
Yes.
why I'm doing this. That's your why. But once you have the why, that's when the practicality comes in, and you got to do that. And one thing that I did a whole video on this, but accountability is just so important. Like, how do
Yeah.
you hold yourself accountable? And like how I view that is there are things that I know that I am not naturally good at holding myself accountable to in a short term, like going to the gym and working out, for instance, is something that's hard for me.
Yeah.
So how do I fix that? Well, I hired a trainer 6 days a week that I know I'm going to be accountable to him, and I
Sure.
show up because I know he's going to be there every day.
Yeah.
And I force myself into that accountability, and I'm always thankful when I do it. But like,
Mhm.
because I force that accountability because I know it's something that's not natural for me.
Yeah.
But I'm very happy to do that because I know it's consistent with the vision of who I want to become, right?
Yeah.
And so, that's how I think about it. Long term, mission that's going to give you that purpose and that drive. But then you have to have a shorter term, tangible plan
Hmm.
with and then a bias to action to move you along that plan.
Yeah.
And then the areas that you know that you are not great at, then build accountability into that to force you to stay on it. And that's really the formula.
So I think a lot of people listening to this could probably relate to this question. So, when let me back into this. When I hear you say you want to build the world's leading or biggest or leading, I'm not sure.
Leading indoor air quality
Indoor
company.
air quality. Okay. So it's about air quality. It's not about filters. That's what I'm picking up. And so usually when I hear someone that's building a company in a very focused way say that, that means they have other ideas down the road of how they can expand their company, not just filters. Not putting words in your mouth, but that's just what comes to mind. So if in the future to get to a billion plus, you start expanding products potentially, how do you not let yourself get excited about those new object, the shiny objects, those new potential paths to revenue, those new things that could be good and fun and different than filters? When you're talking about air quality, you might have these things in your foreview. How do you not start working on those things yet until it's time?
Yeah. We have to realize that, I'm now $250 million plus business with 1,000 employees. And, we have, resources to invest in a different way than when you're like a
That's
one
right, which would
person,
make it
you
harder.
know, entrepreneur. Yeah, but it's actually like, it allows me to build the systems around any investment that I want to make, which is
Yes.
very different than like when you're, bootstrapping or getting something
Mm-hmm.
off the ground, which is how I built to where I am today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we basically have four pillars to our business that I am working towards expanding that I think take us to the leading indoor air quality company. So you have our typical direct to consumer air filter business, which is
Right.
the largest chunk of our revenue today. Is how we kind of got started. But then you have the business to business sales channel within that, which there's more than just the pleated air filter. There's all types of filtration within that,
Mm-hmm.
some of which we've made products for years in, and we're expanding our product lines within that.
Yeah.
But that actually like 70% of the um, air filter market or the filtration market is actually commercial, not residential. Whereas like our direct to consumer business is primarily residential,
Sure.
even though it's much bigger than our B2B business currently. But we've hired a sales team around our core expertise
Yeah.
and our core and core investments that we've already made. And then like the third pillar is like retail sales. It's just another sales channel
Right.
for air filters. But we launched in 550 Walmarts in the last few months,
Okay.
and we're starting to expand our retail presence, which still comes back to this core competency around and around our brand.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a whole other channel for us that could be quite large. And then the fourth, and the one that I'm probably the most excited about, and is also the most different, but it's something that I've actually been working on for 3 or 4 years already, is a service component on top of our filter business. So so much of indoor air quality, is not driven by the filter. It's like they're like UV light like installation and this kind of
Yeah.
stuff, which is very important for your air quality.
Yeah.
Which like a UV light combined with the filter that you put in is like probably the greatest enhancement somebody can
Yeah.
can do to their duct work or their HVAC system. And so in order to be able to execute on that at scale, I need a service arm to be able to help me to do that. And so we're building what we call FilterBuy HVAC Solutions, which is the service component. On top of that,
Yeah.
that is all linked together in the kind of indoor air quality brand. I would not start out a business model. Like if I started 12 years ago saying I'm going to be the world's leading indoor air quality
Mm-hmm.
company, I think that would have been a mistake. I was not ready. I had not put myself in a position to be able to execute against that type of vision. But now, I've laid the groundwork and have the team and the
Mm-hmm.
and the ability to go out and hire and to buy businesses and this kind of stuff
Yeah.
that allow me to execute against that vision. But still, like the indoor air quality is my guiding light, and like we basically determined those four pillars as being the kind of pillars that are going to allow us to build that. And that is our, like, each of those are run in a way that's like, hey, is this going to grow this segment or not? And that's really where the forcing
Well,
mechanism comes
okay.
in.
So, but that kind of gets to the nature of my question is, if you're focused on indoor air quality, okay, that plays true with the four pillars. But how do you know, especially when you have all the resources to build infrastructure and put these plans in place to light each one of these pillars on fire? How do you know when it's time to say follow that thing that excites you a little bit more about the service arm, which is going to take your focus off of the current direct to consumer filter, you know, piece of it, how do you know when it's right to make that next to switch your focus, which is still big picture, still focused, but in the next 3 quarters, 6 quarters, 8 quarters, not focused?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it comes down to you have to know when you've saturated a sales channel.
Okay.
And I think like the advice I give to early entrepreneurs oftentimes is they try to diversify their sales channels too early.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you started,
Right.
scaling on Facebook with the Shopify store, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, and you're selling something that like you figured out a way that you can spend X amount of money and get your Y return consistently. And then you say, oh, I'm doing this well. I'm going to go do it on TikTok now. I'm going to go do it somewhere else. I think that really what you should do is you need to scale that Facebook channel until you no longer can scale it anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like when I say in that kind of early on, I think people diversify way too early, oftentimes in sales channels because they have not earned the right yet because they haven't maximized the one thing that they actually understand because they see
That's
the
right.
shiny object somewhere else, right? And so I think that that's super important. But like you have to look at like my business, for instance. If I just wanted to stick in the pleated air filter market, like basically 1 in 3 pleated air filters purchased online are a FilterBuy air filter today.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means we have, somewhere around 30% market share, depending on what I look at in the
Right.
online air filter market. And it's very difficult to go from 30% to 50%, for instance. I mean, over
Yes.
time, I hope we do. But it's like at some point you do hit saturation, right? It's like our direct to consumer business is at a more mature stage of a business. And so, I spent, a decade building the systems and the infrastructure to support that, and the customer base to support that. But, it's a robust and, fairly stable business that is not going to grow at the rate,
Yeah.
I want to wake up and spend all my time doing. So, like, as I
Right.
told you 2 years ago, I was like, okay, what do I do? Do I sell this business and move on with my life, or what do I want to do? And I did not want to do that. And so for me, that means expanding
Mm-hmm.
my scope, right? I mean, that's really the only option that I have if I
For
want to
sure.
continue to grow and to grow into something big. But if I was early on in my journey, what
Yeah.
I would say is, you got to go out and earn that right
That's
by
right.
maximizing the sales channels. Go
That's it.
get to that 30% market share or whatever it is, and then you earn the right to go and do it. And most people diversify way too early in that. But it's like if I sat here and I believed, oh, I could 10 times my business today just focusing on my core product,
On the one.
then
Yeah.
I would 100% be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I'm at a scale now that is not
Yeah.
realistic. So I
Okay.
have no choice but to expand. Does that make
That
sense?
is a great answer. Yeah, and I would just, for the generality's sake, I would simplify it to say that have you maximized the current focus that you're after before you start on that second path? And if you can't answer that question, you probably haven't maximized it. And
Correct.
that makes total sense. Great, great,
Yeah,
great answer.
correct. And I made that mistake. Like I tried way too early on to diversify into other things, and I actually started a freight business, and I did like a lot of stuff that
Yeah,
cost me a lot of money. That was a mistake for sure. But two things can be true. You can also get to a point where like if you want to grow, you have no choice but to expand your scope,
yes,
which is what ultimately led to me expanding from pleated air filters direct to consumer online to the leading indoor air quality
yeah,
company, right? I mean, like that was a shift that was very conscious after I'd already kind of maximized what I what I could do. I mean, like we're still growing that business, and like I'm still like
sure.
it's not like we've completely maximized it, but it's just way more mature
Mm-hmm.
because that market is only so big, right? And that was really the decision maker for me, and I needed something that was going to get me excited coming in every day. And if I was not excited about that, then either I need to sell that and let somebody else run with it, or I need to expand my mission. And I chose the path of expanding my mission.
Yeah, this is awesome. I hope people listen to this 2 or 3 times because I mean, my head's spinning about all the value that you've given, all the wisdom that, I mean, you're talking about some pillar concepts here that are just, again, to the nature of focus. If you could focus in on just one of these, it really could change the trajectory of your business.
Yeah, I mean, like, especially early on in a business journey, you need to master one sales channel that works or one funnel that
Yeah,
works. I mean,
that's
like that
huge.
that 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 is, and then you need to take that as much as you possibly can,
Mhm.
and because it's way easier to optimize something you understand than something
Yes,
that's completely new. But shiny object syndrome is real, and people
yes,
get sucked into it. And that would be early on the best advice that I would have
yeah.
for anybody.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show. This is amazing. Awesome conversation, as I knew it would be. Before we go, for the sake of it, people that have been following my show, just to show you like what a small world it is. Back when it was your grandfather's company in Talladega, uh, I was a outside sales rep for Cintas Corporation selling
Ah,
uniforms. In that was my
yeah.
territory. So I probably called on someone from that company, if not your grandfather, if he was there, trying to sell uniforms or facility services.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I've definitely run across Cintas sales reps before.
Yes, yes, and I probably knew who they were if they were there in your timing. But that's pretty cool. It's such a small world, you know. I actually lived in Birmingham for 10 years, so that's where I
Uh,
was out of the Bessemer location.
yeah, I
But
went to school at Indian Springs. I actually met my wife at Indian Springs, and we were right there in Birmingham. So
yeah, right off
spent a lot of
280.
time there.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
I've heard a lot of good things about that school. Yeah, that's cool. Well, hey, thanks again. This is such a great conversation. I think it's one that doesn't get the credit that it needs. I think people think that they're focused, but they're not. I can personally attest to that. I'm working very hard in the early part of this year to be focused and just do this one thing. I think the trouble for entrepreneurs, as being one, is that we're creative, we're curious, and we are easily distracted. So focus is a hard,
Yeah.
hard thing.
It's hard. And part of the thing, like when you hear me talking about something so much, it's a signal that it's something that I struggle with, right? I mean, and that's
Yeah.
part of the reason why, like when I put all this content out there, it's really a reminder to myself because I'm talking to myself as much as I am to
Yes.
whoever's watching it. Because this is not easy stuff, but it doesn't mean it's not important. It means it's even more important, and that's why like I need a reminder and actually doing this so publicly really holds me accountable
Yeah.
to doing the things that I'm out there talking about.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of me building in accountability to actually go out and attack this kind of scary vision that I that
Uh-huh.
I've built. Right. So people have to remember that like oftentimes when I'm out here talking about it, it's because I'm reminding myself of how important
Yeah.
it is, not just you.
Nobody's perfect, you know,
No,
but that's great. I
certainly
love
not
it.
me.
Well, thanks again. And of course, we'll send people to filterbuy.com to get their air filters. But if they want to get in touch with you, where should we send them?
I'm David FilterBuy everywhere. So YouTube is where we put the most energy. So just David FilterBuy on YouTube. And I really appreciate if you like and subscribe on that. We put a lot of effort and energy into that. But I'm David FilterBuy basically on every platform, and you can find me there.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thank you.